To speak and move the motion, Ms Ballantyne. 13 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to bring this motion to the Chamber, and I move it in my name. Early learning and childcare is one of the most important areas for any government. Not only does it shape the lives of whole generations, it creates the foundation for Scotland's future. High-quality early learning can play a key role in reducing the attainment gap by giving all of Scotland's children a level playing field on which to build their learning. There is compelling evidence to show that early access to high-quality early learning and childcare can significantly reduce the impact of socioeconomic disadvantage before starting school. And high-quality early learning provides nurturing, stimulating experiences that help children grow and develop. And it can support parents, particularly mothers, to access education, training and work, as well as providing support to vulnerable families. The provision of early learning and childcare is quite simply a policy that no one would want to oppose. It is an investment in the very fabric of our society, and it is for this reason that I am bringing this debate to the Chamber today. The Scottish Government have, in their words, set out the most ambitious expansion of funded early learning and childcare this country has ever seen. But I'm afraid I think they did so without undertaking the level of planning and consultation that might reasonably have been expected, and in doing so have created significant challenges to what I see as a flagship policy. Today is an opportunity to explore those challenges in what I hope will be a constructive and thoughtful manner. Today is about ensuring that the issues raised in the joint report issued by the Accounts Commission and the Auditor General are scrutinised, and that we in this chamber, and perhaps more importantly, the local authorities, nurseries, childminders and parents who are trying to navigate their way through what is being offered, ensure that the end result is something to be celebrated. In opening this debate, I want to cover just a number of the issues raised in both the report and from my visits and many conversations with early years practitioners and both local authority and private nurseries and childminders. Deputy Presiding Officer, on Thursday last week, the First Minister told the Parliament, and I quote, that we delivered the commitment on 600 hours when so many people across the chamber were sceptical that we would do so. We delivered it, we have shown a track record in delivering expanded childcare, and we are on track to deliver the next expansion. However, the Accounts Commission and Auditor General's report clearly states the Scottish Government failed to set out clearly the improved outcomes for children and parents that the expansion to 600 hours was designed to achieve. Furthermore, there is a lack of evidence that increasing funded hours in this way that the Scottish Government has done so far will deliver improved outcomes. I would therefore ask the Minister, when she comes to speak, how are you measuring the success of the 600 hours rollout, and how do we know that it has been delivered and has been a success? To me, it is clear that the Scottish Government did fail to set out clearly the improved outcomes for children and parents that the expansion was meant to achieve, and equally how it would assess the impact of that additional investment. There were no measures to indicate success, nor was the baseline data available, and these basic steps should have been addressed in 2014, if not earlier. It would appear that these issues have also carried over to the 1140 hours expansion, with a recent Freedom of Information request from Reform Scotland revealing that the Scottish Government has confirmed that it does not know how many children are currently eligible and entitled to preschool provision, but are unable to access it or are on a waiting list. Additionally, research by the Scottish Government, the National Day Nursery Association and Fair Funding for Our Kids have found that 1 in 5 children are missing out on their current funded hours. And yet the Scottish Government claim there is a 97% registration for funded childcare. So are we talking about registration or are we talking about access and delivered? When it comes to planning an expansion on this scale, should the Scottish Government not start by getting these essential facts right? Not because we want to pull them up on it and not because we want to make an issue of it, but because if it's not right, then we are going to get it wrong for our children, a generation of children who will not get a second opportunity. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government do need to be clear about the priority of this policy. Is it for children? Is it for parents? Or is it for both? As in its current state, it largely fails to achieve the outcomes for both. Indeed, in January, the Scottish Government published an initial evaluation of the expansion of early learning, in which it states the expansion from 475 to 600 hours in 2014 is not expected to lead to measurable change in children's outcomes. We've also seen this reflected in parents' responses to the expansion, particularly around flexibility, accessibility and payment. Research by Fair Funding for Our Kids has found that after the implementation of the expansion to 600 hours, 9 out of 10 parents who want to change their working situation say that their main barrier is lack of appropriate childcare. The Scottish Government then estimates that the cost of delivering the 1,140 hours of early learning and childcare will be around £840 million a year. Councils, on the other hand, have placed their initial estimate for the expansion at around £1 billion a year. This is far higher than the Scottish Government's estimate and does raise serious questions about the feasibility of the policy and risk councils being left to deal with a £160 million black hole. To further add to the confusion around funding, the Scottish Government are saying there is a big difference as well in the essential changes to childcare infrastructure, with local authorities setting aside £600 million capital funding between 2019 and 20, and the Scottish Government have only allocated £400 million for this purpose. At a time when councils across the country are feeling pressure on their budgets, they will struggle to make up the shortfall. Yes?
Stuart McMillan.
I thank Michelle Ballantyne for taking the intervention, but on the issue of funding, if Michelle Ballantyne is seriously concerned about the issue of funding, how then would her party actually have paid for and funded this particular policy if there was going to be another £500 million reduced from the Scottish budget?
Michelle Ballantyne.
Well, I think if Stuart had taken the time to read our manifesto and our approach to this, they would have found that we wouldn't have gone about it in the same way. We would have taken a staged approach to it, starting with the most vulnerable 1- and 2-year-olds and working forwards. And I think in many ways this is about how you plan it, not just a good intention. We don't disagree with the intention. It's about whether we can actually deliver it. And I say we, because in the end, this is about all of us. It's about all the local authorities, and it's about all of our children. Areas such as Midlothian, which is one of the ones that will struggle, it's the fastest growing local authority in Scotland, and they will be particularly hard hit as they struggle to find both the revenue and the capital funding needed to implement this policy. And this will only be compounded by pressures on partner provider areas in the area, such as after-school clubs, who are already struggling, and they're seeing their rents raised as budget cuts are made. In addition to these financial pressures, the Scottish Government has estimated that an additional 8,000 full-time equivalent staff will be required to implement the expansion. And yet the Council's estimations show that they need 12,000 more staff, including staff in training and central staff. Now, I am aware that the Scottish Government have launched a recruitment drive, but this is still a daunting figure and a significant difference in numbers. The First Minister told the Chamber on Thursday that the Scottish Further and Higher Education Funding Council is offering about 1,500 additional places, and there are 836 additional graduate level places. Now, I'm not decrying the efforts being made, but is this really going to be enough staff to complete this ambitious expansion of childcare in Scotland? Research by Skills Development Scotland cast doubts on this, showing that although partner providers are optimistic about retaining existing staff, 63% are already finding it difficult or fairly difficult to recruit suitable new employees. Indeed, partner providers may well struggle with the introduction of the 1140 hours because 41% are not confident about their ability to accommodate the expansion. This in part may be due for them to a loss of staff because they are finding a drain from the partner providers to council providers who can offer more generous paying conditions. And I noted that recently on a visit to a nursery, which is an exemplar, and it was indeed an exemplar. It was an excellent example of how 1140 can be delivered. But the problem is they had a purpose-built building that was already there. They had all the staff they needed, and they were heavily oversubscribed. So I think we have to give some real thought to how our partner providers are actually going to cope. I've visited several private nurseries across the country and spoken to many of the managers and owners who have confirmed that this is the case. If partner providers continue to lose their most qualified staff, this will impact on the future quality of childcare available to parents, as well as pushing up the fees in order to retain these staff. And this in turn could limit parents' choice in finding a local high-quality nursery or lead to private nurseries closing down. And I would be very interested to hear today what the government's position is when it comes to the money, because the partner provider offer at the moment, which is sitting between usually 345 and 375, will not cover the costs that private nurseries need to deliver the offer that is intended.
Minister.
I can absolutely understand why the member is concerned, because in England, where the Tories are in charge, the NDNA has said about the expansion process there, the Chancellor has given a clear message that this government is not interested in properly investing in early years and just expects the sector to get on with it while faced with all of these increases. NDNA will continue to lobby the government to address this appalling situation until a fair hourly funding rate and business rates relief for nurseries are forthcoming. In contrast, do you agree?
I think that's a long intervention, Minister. I think, please, that's a good point. It's a long intervention. I'll give you your time back.
I think two things from that, Minister. If you are reading all about that and you feel there are real issues south of the border, then this should be a learning curve for you in terms of what to do. And actually, it's an interesting one because they are rolling out the 1140 hours. At the moment, parents in England are accessing the 1140 hours, and the complaint is not around their ability to access it. Yep. So I think there is learning to be had, both negative and positive, but it does not immediately address the issues I just raised, and the question was not one that was pertinent to what I just said. The Accounts Commission has added that many councils' expansions plans do not include detailed information on how they plan to recruit all these additional staff. And often the plans do not take account of the numbers of staff required by partner providers. And I wonder whether that may account for some of the differences that we're seeing between the government numbers and the numbers that are coming forward from local councils. There are many, many other issues that I'm sure will be raised today around this. But my key issue in all of this is that we have to do right by our children and by our parents. And for our children, we will only do right by them if we have high quality provision. We know and evidence shows us that poor quality provision will do more harm. It will actually lessen the chances, particularly of our more vulnerable children, in their life chances going forward. We cannot have high quality provision unless we have good quality staff, which means we need to roll out provision that is staffed by people who have good quality learning themselves, good quality qualifications and experience. And I worry that in this rush, there is not going to be the time to develop these staff adequately. So many of our initial children will suffer from a poorer quality provision than we actually intend to give them.
Thank you. Please conclude. Thank you. I now call on Marie Todd to speak to move Amendment 10650.3. 8 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The expansion of funded early learning and childcare will transform our children's life chances. By 2020, we will provide all 3- and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds with 1140 hours of high-quality nursery education and will ensure that all of our children get the best start in life. Such ambitious plans always come with challenges, and I do not deny that they exist, but we are absolutely committed to addressing them in partnership with local